She's just being dramatic. Let her figure it out herself. Those were the words that came through my phone screen as I lay bleeding on my bathroom floor 3 days after surgery. What I discovered next about my own son and his mistress made that moment seem like nothing. The revenge I took left them both destroyed. I'm glad to have you here. Follow my story until the end and comment the city you're watching from so I can see how far my story has reached. I never imagined that at 70 years old, fresh out of the hospital, I would learn the true nature of the people I called family. My name is Dorothy Caldwell, and I thought I'd seen every kind of betrayal life could offer during my 7 decades on this earth. But standing in my son's living room 2 weeks after my gallbladder surgery, watching him choose his mistress over his own mother, I realized I had been living in a comfortable delusion. My story begins in the quiet suburb of Maplewood Heights, a tree-lined community about 40 minutes north of Seattle. I'd lived in the same modest 3-bedroom house for 38 years, the house where I'd raised my son after my husband Thomas passed away from a sudden heart attack when our boy was only 12 years old. That boy, my son Kenneth, was now 45 years old, with a successful career in commercial real estate development. He'd built himself up from nothing, working his way through community college and then university, while I worked double shifts at the hospital, where I was a medical records administrator. I was so proud of him. He'd married a wonderful woman named Diane, a kindergarten teacher, with the warmest smile you'd ever seen. Together they had 2 children who were the light of my life, 15-year-old Sophia and 11-year-old Marcus. Every Sunday, without fail, we gathered at my house for dinner. I'd cook Kenneth's favorite pot roast with roasted vegetables, and Diane would bring her famous apple pie. The grandchildren would tell me about school, their friends, their dreams. Those Sunday dinners were sacred to me. They were what I lived for after Thomas died, what got me through the lonely weeks. Life wasn't perfect, but it was good. I had my health, my family, my garden, and my bridge club on Tuesday afternoons. At 70, I considered myself blessed. Then everything changed. It was 3 months before my surgery when the first cracks appeared in our perfect family picture. Kenneth started missing Sunday dinners. First, it was just one Sunday, an important client meeting that couldn't be rescheduled. Then another, a property development emergency in Spokane. Then another and another. Diane started coming to Sunday dinners without him, and I noticed the strain in her smile, the shadows under her eyes. The children were quieter than usual, more withdrawn. Something was wrong, but every time I asked Diane if everything was fine, she'd paste on that brave smile and insist everything was fine. "Just work stress," she'd say. "You know how demanding Kenneth's job can be." I knew my son. I'd raised him alone for 23 years before he married Diane. I could tell when he was hiding something, and he was definitely hiding something. The truth came out on a rainy Tuesday afternoon in March. I'd driven to Kenneth's office in downtown Seattle to drop off some tax documents he'd left at my house after his last visit. The receptionist told me Kenneth was in a meeting in conference room B, but I could wait in his office if I wanted. I didn't want to wait. The documents were time-sensitive, and I thought I'd just pop my head in, hand them over, and be on my way. The conference room had frosted glass walls, so you couldn't see clearly inside, but as I approached, I could make out 2 figures standing very close together. I opened the door. Kenneth was there, his arms wrapped around a young woman I'd never seen before. They were kissing, not a friendly peck, but the kind of passionate embrace that left no doubt about the nature of their relationship. They sprang apart when the door opened. Kenneth's face went white, then red. "Mom, we were just..." But I wasn't listening to his stammering excuses. I was staring at the woman. She couldn't have been more than 30 years old, tall and slender, with long black hair and sharp, calculating eyes. She didn't look embarrassed or ashamed. She looked annoyed at the interruption. "Mrs. Caldwell, I presume," she said coolly, extending her hand like we were meeting at a cocktail party. I'm Sienna Blackwood. I work with Kenneth on the Riverside Development Project. I didn't take her hand. I was too busy trying to process what I was seeing, trying to reconcile this scene with the man I thought I knew. Kenneth, I said, quietly, my voice shaking. What about Diane? What about Sophia and Marcus? He couldn't meet my eyes. Mom, you don't understand. Sienna and I, we have a connection, something I've never felt before. Diane and I, we've grown apart. We're more like roommates than spouses. You have 2 children, I said, my voice rising despite my efforts to stay calm. You have a wife who loves you, who supported you through everything, and you're throwing it all away for... I gestured helplessly at Sienna. For someone who actually understands me, Kenneth finished, finally looking at me with defiance in his eyes. Mom, I'm 45 years old. I'm not a child. I have a right to be happy.
What about Diane's happiness? What about Sophia and Marcus's happiness? Sienna spoke up then, her voice dripping with false sympathy. Mrs. Caldwell, I understand this is difficult for you, but Kenneth and I are in love. Sometimes these things just happen. The heart wants what it wants. I looked at this young woman, this stranger who was helping my son destroy his family, and felt rage boil up inside me. Get out, I said to her. Excuse me? Sienna raised one perfectly shaped eyebrow. This is a family matter. Get out of this office right now. Sienna looked at Kenneth, waiting for him to defend her. And to my horror, he did. Mom, you can't talk to Sienna like that. She has every right to be here. This is her office too. I stared at my son, this man I'd sacrificed everything for, who was now choosing his mistress over basic respect for his mother. Something shifted inside me in that moment. I felt the first whisper of the isolation that would nearly destroy me 3 months later. I left the office without another word, the tax documents still clutched in my shaking hands. Within 2 weeks, Kenneth had moved out of the family home. He rented a luxury penthouse apartment in the newly developed Riverside complex, one of the properties his company had just finished. Sienna moved in with him immediately. Diane was devastated. I spent hours with her, holding her while she cried, helping her explain to Sophia and Marcus why Daddy wasn't living at home anymore. The children were confused and angry. Sophia stopped eating properly and her grades began to slip. Marcus started having nightmares and wetting the bed again, something he hadn't done since he was 5. I begged Kenneth to reconsider, to think about what he was doing to his family. We met for coffee one Saturday morning at a small cafe in Maplewood Heights, neutral territory where we could talk. Mom, I know you're disappointed in me, he started, stirring his coffee nervously. But I need you to understand, I was dying inside that marriage. Diane is a wonderful person, but we wanted different things. She's content with her small life, teaching, gardening, PTA meetings. I need more. I need someone who challenges me, who pushes me to be better. And Sienna does that? I couldn't keep the skepticism out of my voice. His face lit up in a way I hadn't seen in years. She does, Mom. She's brilliant, ambitious. She sees the potential in me that no one else does. She believes in my vision for the company, for my future. With her by my side, I can accomplish things I never dreamed possible. Kenneth, she's 17 years younger than you. She's closer in age to Sophia than she is to you. He bristled at that. Age is just a number. What Sienna and I have transcends that. You'd understand if you got to know her. I don't want to know her, I said flatly. She's helping you destroy your family. She's hurting your children. Why would I want to know someone like that? His expression hardened. Because she's going to be part of my life from now on. And if you want to be part of my life, you're going to have to accept that. The implicit threat hung in the air between us. Accept Sienna or lose access to Kenneth. It felt like emotional blackmail, and it made me furious. Don't you dare threaten me, I said, my voice low and intense. I'm your mother. I raised you alone after your father died. I worked myself to exhaustion to give you every opportunity. And now you're telling me I have to accept the woman who helped you abandon your wife and children, or you'll cut me out of your life? I'm not cutting you out, Mom. I'm asking you to respect my choices. I'm asking you to give Sienna a chance. I stood up from the table, gathering my purse. I walked out of that cafe with tears streaming down my face, terrified that I was losing my son, but unable to compromise my principles by endorsing his affair. The next 2 months were tense. Kenneth and I maintained minimal contact, brief phone calls, the occasional text message. He stopped coming to Sunday dinners entirely. I saw him only when he dropped by to pick up mail that still came to my address, or to get things from the garage that he'd stored there over the years. During those visits, he was polite but distant. We talked about surface things, the weather, his work projects, my garden. We didn't talk about Diane, the children, or Sienna. Those topics were landmines we both carefully avoided. I threw myself into supporting Diane and the grandchildren. I helped Sophia with her homework, took Marcus to his soccer games, had them over for dinner twice a week. I tried to fill the hole that Kenneth had left in their lives, but I knew I was a poor substitute for their father. Diane filed for divorce in May. Kenneth didn't contest it, which somehow made it worse. He just wanted it done quickly and quietly. He offered a generous financial settlement, more than fair, his lawyer assured Diane, almost as if he were paying them off to assuage his guilt. I watched my family fracture and felt powerless to stop it. But I told myself that at least Kenneth and I were still in contact, still connected by that unbreakable bond between mother and son. I believed that eventually he would come to his senses and realize what he lost. I believed that our relationship, at least, would survive the storm. I had no idea how wrong I was.
It started with pain. Sharp, stabbing pain in my upper right abdomen that would come in waves, leaving me breathless and nauseous. The first attack happened on a Tuesday evening in late May while I was preparing dinner. I had to lie down on the kitchen floor, waiting for the pain to pass, before I could even make it to the phone to call my doctor. Dr. Harrison Chen at Maplewood Heights Medical Center had been my physician for 20 years. After running tests and an ultrasound, he delivered the diagnosis: gallstones, multiple large stones that were causing repeated attacks of cholecystitis, inflammation of the gallbladder. "Dorothy, you need to have your gallbladder removed," Dr. Chen said, his kind face serious behind his glasses. "These attacks are only going to get worse and more frequent. Eventually, one of these stones could cause a blockage or infection that could be life-threatening." "How soon?" I asked, trying to process this information. "Ideally within the next month. Sooner if you have another severe attack." Surgery. At 70 years old. The idea terrified me, but the pain of the attacks terrified me more. I scheduled the surgery for June 15th, a laparoscopic cholecystectomy, Dr. Chen called it. Minimally invasive, 3 small incisions, home the next day, routine. But I wouldn't be going home to an empty house, recovering alone. I needed help. Someone to drive me to and from the hospital, someone to stay with me for at least the first few days while I was on pain medication and unable to care for myself properly. I called Kenneth on a Wednesday evening, 2 weeks before the surgery date. My hands were shaking as I dialed his number. We hadn't spoken in almost 3 weeks, not since a brief, awkward conversation about forwarding some mail. "Kenneth?" "Hi," he answered, sounding distracted. I could hear music and conversation in the background. "What's up?" "Kenneth, I need to tell you something. I'm having surgery on June 15th. My gallbladder needs to come out." There was a pause. The background noise faded, as if he'd moved to a quieter room. "Surgery? Are you okay? Is it serious?" "The surgery itself is routine, but I've been having severe attacks. The doctor says it needs to be done." I took a breath. "Kenneth, I'm going to need help afterward. Just for the first few days, someone to drive me home from the hospital, help me with things around the house while I recover. I was hoping you could—" "Of course, Mom," he interrupted,
and the warmth in his voice made tears spring to my eyes. "Of course I'll be there. You're my mother. I'll take care of everything." The relief that washed over me was overwhelming. Despite everything that had happened, despite the distance between us, Kenneth was still my son. He would still be there when I really needed him. "Thank you," I whispered. "Thank you, Kenneth." "Don't even worry about it. I'll make sure you're taken care of. Sienna will understand. Family comes first." That last comment sent a small chill through me, but I pushed it aside. He'd said he would be there. That was what mattered. We talked for another 10 minutes, Kenneth asking questions about the procedure, the recovery time, what I would need. He sounded genuinely concerned, genuinely engaged. It felt like talking to my son again, not the stranger he'd become over the past few months. When I hung up, I felt lighter than I had in weeks. Maybe this health crisis would be the thing that brought Kenneth back to his senses. Maybe facing his mother's mortality would remind him what was truly important in life. I allowed myself to hope. June 15th dawned gray and drizzly, typical Seattle weather. I'd been instructed not to eat or drink anything after midnight, and my stomach churned with nervous anticipation as I showered and dressed in comfortable clothes for the hospital. Kenneth had promised to pick me up at 5:30 a.m. The surgery was scheduled for 7, and I needed to be at the hospital by 6 for pre-op procedures. At 5:30, I stood by my front window with my overnight bag, watching for Kenneth's silver Mercedes. 5:35. No sign of him. 5:40. Still nothing. At 5:45, I called him. It went straight to voicemail. "Kenneth, it's Mom. I'm ready whenever you are. See you soon." By 6 o'clock, I was starting to panic. If we didn't leave soon, I'd be late for my surgery. I called again. Voicemail again. At 6:15, my phone finally rang. Kenneth's name appeared on the screen. "Kenneth, where are you? I need to be at the hospital right now." "Mom, I'm so sorry." He sounded genuinely distressed. "I completely overslept. Sienna and I were out late last night at a fundraiser, and I forgot to set my alarm. I'm getting ready now, but there's no way I can make it to Maplewood Heights and get you to the hospital on time. You're going to have to call a cab." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "A cab? Kenneth, I'm about to have surgery. I'm scared. I need my family with me." "I know, Mom, and I'm sorry, I really am, but I can't control traffic, and you can't be late for surgery. Just take a cab, and I'll meet you at the hospital as soon as I can. I promise I'll be there before you go in." What choice did I have? I called a taxi, my hands shaking with hurt and disappointment. The driver, a kind elderly Sikh man named Harpreet, noticed my distress. "Hospital emergency?" he asked gently as we drove through the quiet morning streets. "Surgery," I managed. "My son was supposed to drive me, but—" "Family," Harpreet said with understanding, nodding. "Sometimes they disappoint us, but you are strong. You will be fine." His kindness made tears stream down my face. I stared at that message, feeling something harden inside my chest. This wasn't just distraction or forgetfulness. This was deliberate distance. This was abandonment wearing the mask of busyness. But I still had hope. Tomorrow would be better. Tomorrow he would come. I spent the rest of that day struggling through basic tasks that had been effortless just days before. Changing my wound dressings took 30 minutes and left me sweating and nauseated. Taking a shower required so much energy that I had to lie down for an hour afterward. Making a simple sandwich exhausted me to the point of tears. By evening, I'd developed a low-grade fever. 99.8 degrees, according to the thermometer I kept in my medicine cabinet. The discharge instructions said to watch for fever above 100.4, so I wasn't quite there yet, but the warmth spreading through my body worried me. I called Gladys, who came over immediately with homemade chicken soup and fresh bread. "Dorothy, you look terrible," she said bluntly.
pressing her cool hand against my forehead. "You're burning up! Where's Kenneth?" "Working," I said, trying to make it sound reasonable. "He's very busy with a big project." Gladys made that same disapproving noise she'd made the day before. "Too busy for his mother who just had surgery? That boy needs a talking to." But she didn't push it further. She heated up the soup, made sure I ate and took my medication, and checked my wound dressings. The incision sites looked okay to her non-medical eye, a bit red, but not alarmingly so. "You call me if you need anything," she insisted before leaving. "I don't care if it's 3 a.m. You call." After she left, I lay on the couch in the gathering darkness and felt truly alone for the first time since Thomas died 8 years ago. Even then, I'd had Kenneth. Even in my deepest grief over losing my husband, I'd known my son was there. My son loved me. My son would help me carry me through the darkness. Now, I wasn't sure I had anyone at all. I woke on the 3rd day to a fever of 100.9 and pain that had shifted from manageable to alarming. One of my incision sites, the largest one near my navel, was definitely more swollen than it had been the day before. The redness had spread, and when I gently pressed around it, the pain made me gasp. Something was wrong. I knew it, with the certainty that comes from living in your body for 70 years and recognizing when something has gone beyond normal post-surgical discomfort into actual medical concern. I needed help. Not tomorrow, not when convenient, but now. I called Kenneth at 8 a.m. The phone rang 6 times before going to voicemail. I didn't leave a message. I waited 10 minutes and called again. Voicemail again. The fever was making everything feel surreal, like I was moving through water. My hand shook as I tried to change the dressing on the infected incision. The medical tape wouldn't stick properly because my fingers weren't coordinating the way they should. I dropped the sterile gauze pad on the floor and had to get a new one, each movement requiring enormous concentration. At 9:30 a.m., I sent Kenneth a text. "Kenneth, I really need your help. I think my incision might be infected. I'm running a fever, and I'm out of food and medication. Please come as soon as you can. I'm scared." I stared at my phone, willing it to light up immediately with Kenneth's response, with his assurance that he was on his way, that his mother's health came before any meeting or project or anything else in his life. An hour passed, then 2 hours, then 3. The fever climbed to 100.3. The room seemed to tilt when I tried to stand. I knew I needed to eat something with my pain medication, but the crackers were gone and I didn't have the strength to make anything else. I managed to choke down the pills with water and prayed they would stay down. At 1 p.m., desperate and feeling increasingly disoriented from the fever, I sent another text. "Please, Kenneth, I really need you. I'm not doing well." Nothing. Absolute silence. At 2:30 p.m., I tried to stand up to get more water and felt the world spin violently. My legs gave out and I fell. Not far, just to my knees, then onto my side on the bathroom floor where I had been trying to reach the sink. But the impact sent a sharp, tearing pain through my abdomen. I lay there on the cold tile, gasping, and felt wetness spreading under my shirt. When I managed to lift the fabric and look down, I saw that the infected incision had started bleeding. Not profusely, but enough that blood was seeping through the fresh bandage I'd struggled to apply that morning. This was it. This was the moment I'd been dreading, the moment that proved I was truly alone in a way I'd never been before. Not even when Thomas died had I felt this abandoned, because then I'd had Kenneth. Kenneth had held me at the funeral. Kenneth had called every day for months. Kenneth was my anchor when everything else fell apart. Now Kenneth was gone, and I was bleeding on a bathroom floor with a fever of 101 degrees, and no one was coming. I managed to reach my phone, which I'd had the foresight to carry with me to the bathroom. My fingers felt thick and clumsy as I typed, "I fell. I'm bleeding. Please, Richard, I need you." I hit send, and then lay there, my cheek pressed against the cold tile, waiting. Surely this would get his attention. Surely telling him I'd fallen and was bleeding would snap him out of whatever fog he was in and remind him that I was his mother, that I'd given him life, that I deserved better than this. The phone buzzed in my hand. Relief flooded through me so powerfully that I almost started crying. He'd responded. Finally, he was responding. But when I looked at the screen, my blood ran cold. It wasn't a direct text to me. It was a group message, and I was included, clearly by accident. The message was from a number I didn't recognize, but the name at the top of the screen said Sienna Blackwood.
She's just being dramatic. Your mom has always been clingy and needy. This is exactly why we can't have her around all the time. Let her figure it out herself. I stared at those words, reading them over and over, my fever-fogged brain struggling to process what I was seeing. Then Kenneth's response appeared. You're right, she does this for attention. I'll check on her tomorrow. Another message from Sienna. Tomorrow? Kenneth, we have that meeting with the investors from Singapore tomorrow. That's way more important than your mom's drama. She survived surgery. She'll survive a few days alone. She's not as fragile as she pretends to be. Kenneth's reply. True. I'll just call her instead. Less time commitment. Sienna. Good. The less time we waste on her, the better. We have actual important things to focus on. Once the paperwork goes through next month, this will all be over anyway. Kenneth. Can't wait. Just a few more weeks of dealing with this. I lay on that bathroom floor, my phone clutched in my trembling hand, reading those messages over and over until the words burned themselves into my brain. Each sentence felt like a knife sliding between my ribs, finding my heart, twisting. She's just being dramatic. She does this for attention. Less time we waste on her, the better. Once the paperwork goes through, this will all be over anyway. Just a few more weeks of dealing with this. The fever, the pain, the bleeding, all of it receded into the background as I processed what I was seeing. This wasn't neglect born of distraction. This wasn't a busy man forgetting about his mother because work was overwhelming. This was calculated. This was intentional. This was abandonment with purpose. And that last exchange, about paperwork going through, about things being over, about only needing to deal with this for a few more weeks, what did that mean? Something cold and sharp pierced through my fever haze, something that felt like the first stirrings of real fear, not just about my immediate medical situation, but about something larger, something more sinister. What paperwork? What was happening in a few weeks? Why would things be over then? I forced myself to focus despite the fever making my thoughts slip and slide. I needed to get help. I needed medical attention. But more than that, I needed to understand what was happening, what Kenneth and Sienna were planning. Using the bathtub edge for support, I pulled myself up. Every movement was agony. The room spun wildly, and I had to stop several times to catch my breath and wait for the nausea to pass. But eventually, I was standing, leaning heavily against the sink, staring at my reflection in the mirror. I looked like a ghost. My skin was gray and sheened with sweat. My eyes were too bright with fever. My hair hung in limp strands around my face. I looked like what I was, a sick, elderly woman with no one to help her. But I also saw something else in those eyes, a spark of anger. A determination that the fever and pain couldn't quite extinguish. They thought I was dramatic. They thought I was seeking attention. They thought I was needy and clingy, and an inconvenience to be endured for just a few more weeks. I would show them exactly how dramatic I could be. I cleaned the bleeding incision as best I could with shaking hands, applied a fresh bandage, and then slowly, painfully made my way back to the living room. I sat on the couch and called a taxi service. I need a ride to Maplewood Heights Medical Center, emergency room entrance. Are you experiencing a medical emergency, ma'am? Should I send an ambulance? No, I said, my voice stronger than I felt. I can make it to a taxi. Just please send someone as quickly as possible. 20 minutes later, a taxi pulled up outside my house. The driver, a young woman with kind eyes and pink streaked hair, helped me into the back seat when she saw how unsteady I was. You okay, ma'am? You look pretty sick. I just had surgery a few days ago. I think I have an infection. My family was supposed to help me, but... I trailed off, unable to finish that sentence. Her expression hardened. Say no more. Let's get you to the hospital. She drove carefully but quickly, glancing at me in the rearview mirror several times. My grandma went through something similar. Family promised to help after her hip replacement, then left her hanging. People can be real garbage sometimes, even family. Especially family, I murmured, closing my eyes against a wave of dizziness. At the ER driver insisted on helping me inside before she would accept payment. She waited until a nurse had taken me back to a triage room before leaving, pressing a business card into my hand. My name is Riley. If you need a ride home and your family doesn't show up again, you call me directly, no charge. I nearly cried at that small kindness from a complete stranger. The ER staff took one look at me and fast-tracked me through triage. My fever was now 102.1, my blood pressure was elevated from pain and stress, and when the nurse examined my incision sites, she made a small sound of concern. "This one is definitely infected," she said, gently palpating around the swollen red area near my navel. "We're going to get you started on IV antibiotics right away. Dr. Patel is on duty today. She's excellent with post-surgical complications." They settled me in a curtained exam bay, started an IV, and drew blood for tests. A young resident named Dr. Marcus Webb came in first to take my history. "Mrs. Caldwell, can you tell me what's been happening since your surgery?" I told him everything, the increasing pain, the fever, the fall that morning. What I didn't tell him was about the text messages, about my son calling me dramatic and clingy, about being abandoned on purpose.
That shame was mine to carry, at least for now. Dr. Anita Patel arrived shortly after, a woman in her early 40s with sharp, intelligent eyes and a no-nonsense demeanor. She examined me thoroughly, asked pointed questions, and then delivered her verdict. "Mrs. Caldwell, you have a significant post-surgical infection. Your white blood cell count is elevated, and, based on what I'm seeing, this infection has been developing for at least 2 days. Why didn't you come in sooner?" "I thought it would get better," I said weakly. "I was taking my antibiotics. I was following the wound care instructions." "You live alone?" Dr. Patel asked, pulling up a stool to sit at eye level with me. "Yes." "No family nearby to help with recovery?" I hesitated. Then, "My son lives about 20 minutes away." Dr. Patel's expression remained neutral, but I saw a flicker of something in her eyes. Understanding, perhaps, or recognition of a story she'd heard too many times before. "I see. Well, Mrs. Caldwell, I'm going to admit you overnight for IV antibiotics and observation. This infection needs aggressive treatment, and frankly, you need rest and proper care. The social worker will come by to discuss your discharge plan and make sure you have adequate support when you go home." "That's really not necessary," I started, but she cut me off gently. "It's absolutely necessary. You're 70 years old, you just had surgery, you have an infection, and you've clearly been trying to manage your recovery without adequate support. We need to make sure you're properly healed and that you have a real plan in place before you leave this hospital." There was no arguing with her tone. Part of me felt relief at having the decision taken out of my hands. I would stay in the hospital, where people would take care of me, where I wouldn't have to struggle alone, where I was safe. They moved me to a room on the medical floor 2 hours later, a private room, quiet and clean, with a window overlooking the hospital courtyard. The nurses were kind and efficient. They checked my vital signs regularly, adjusted my IV antibiotics, brought me juice and crackers when I said I was hungry. And slowly as the antibiotics began working and my fever started to drop, my mind began to clear. I thought about those text messages, about the cruelty in Sienna's words and Kenneth's easy agreement with her assessment, about the mysterious paperwork that was going through in a few weeks, after which everything would be over. What paperwork could possibly make dealing with me unnecessary in a few weeks? A terrible suspicion began forming in my mind. I tried to push it away, telling myself I was being paranoid, that the fever and pain medication were making me imagine dark conspiracies where none existed. But I couldn't shake the feeling that I'd stumbled onto something important, something dangerous. Something that explained why Kenneth had suddenly become so distant, so neglectful, so willing to listen to his mistress over his own conscience. Around 6 p.m., my hospital phone rang. I stared at it for a long moment before picking up, knowing somehow that it would be Kenneth, finally reaching out now that hours had passed since my desperate texts. Hello? Oh my God, Mom, where are you? Kenneth's voice was high with what sounded like panic. I went to your house and you weren't there. Gladys said she saw an ambulance. Are you okay? I'm in the hospital, I said flat, emotionless. The fever had broken, but the hurt hadn't. If anything, it had crystallized into something harder and colder. Maplewood Heights Medical Center. I have an infection from my surgery. They're keeping me overnight. What? Why didn't you call me? The audacity of that question took my breath away. I did call you, Kenneth, multiple times. I texted you that I was scared, that I thought I had an infection, that I needed help. You were in meetings all day, Mom. My phone was on silent. I didn't see... I texted you that I'd fallen and was bleeding. That was at 2:30 this afternoon. It's now 6 p.m. You're telling me you didn't check your phone once in 3.5 hours? There was a pause. Then, I'm sorry, Mom. I should have checked. I'm coming to the hospital right now. Don't bother, I said, surprising myself with the coldness in my tone. Visiting hours end at 8, and I'm sure you have better things to do than waste time on your dramatic, attention-seeking mother. There was another pause, longer this time. When Kenneth spoke again, his voice was wary. Mom, what are you talking about? You tell me, Kenneth. You tell me about how I'm clingy and needy, about how much time you're wasting dealing with me, about how you can't wait for the paperwork to go through so this'll all be over. The silence on the other end of the line was deafening. I could practically hear Kenneth's mind racing, trying to figure out how I'd seen those messages. Mom, you have to understand, Sienna was just what? Just telling you the truth about how burdensome your post-surgical mother is? Just helping you prioritize your important investor meetings over whether I was bleeding on my bathroom floor? It wasn't like that, Kenneth said, but his voice lacked conviction. You're taking things out of context. Sienna doesn't know you the way I do. She didn't mean... What paperwork, Kenneth? The question hung in the air between us. I heard Kenneth's sharp intake of breath.
What paperwork is going through in a few weeks that's going to make all this over? What exactly is going to be over? Mom, you're sick and you're upset. This isn't the time to have this conversation. Then when is the time? I demanded. When is the time to discuss why my son has abandoned me after surgery? When is the time to talk about whatever you and your mistress are planning? I haven't abandoned you, Kenneth said, his voice rising. You're in a hospital getting excellent care. You're fine. I'm fine? I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Kenneth, I fell on my bathroom floor 3 days after surgery because I was running a fever and had no food or medication, and my son, my only child, couldn't be bothered to respond to my calls for help. I took a taxi to the emergency room by myself. A complete stranger showed me more kindness and concern than you have. That's not fair, Mom. I have responsibilities. I have a business to run. I can't drop everything every time you... Every time I what? I interrupted. Every time I have a medical emergency? Every time I need help after major surgery? Exactly how often do you think I'm asking for your help, Kenneth? He didn't answer. I'll tell you how often, I continued, my voice shaking now with anger and hurt. This is the first time I've asked you for anything substantial in 8 years. 8 years since your father died, and I managed everything on my own. I worked, I paid my bills, I took care of myself, I helped you with your children. I never asked you for money or time or anything beyond the occasional dinner and phone call. And the one time I have a serious medical situation and legitimately need help, you can't be bothered because Sienna thinks I'm being dramatic? Mom! I want you to think very carefully about what you say next, I said quietly, because whatever comes out of your mouth right now is going to determine whether we have any relationship going forward. The silence stretched out so long I thought he'd hung up. Then finally, I'll come to the hospital tomorrow. We'll talk then when you're feeling better. Don't come for me, I said. Come because you actually want to explain what's happening. Come because you're ready to tell me the truth about whatever you and Sienna are planning. Otherwise, don't bother.
I hung up before he could respond, my hands shaking so badly I nearly dropped the phone. A nurse appeared in my doorway moments later. "Mrs. Caldwell, are you okay? Your heart rate spiked on the monitor." "I'm fine," I said automatically, then stopped myself. "Actually, no, I'm not fine, but I will be." The nurse, her name tag said Sandra, came over and adjusted my pillows, checked my IV. "Family troubles?" she asked gently. I nodded, not trusting my voice. "Been there," Sandra said with a sympathetic smile. "Sometimes the people who are supposed to love us the most are the ones who hurt us the worst. But you're strong, I can tell. You'll get through this." After she left, I lay in that hospital bed, staring at the ceiling, my mind racing despite the exhaustion weighing down my limbs. Kenneth had basically admitted to the text messages by not denying them. He offered weak excuses and tried to turn it around on me, making me the unreasonable one for being hurt that he had abandoned me after surgery. But he hadn't explained the paperwork. He dodged that question entirely. What could he possibly be planning that would make dealing with me unnecessary in a few weeks? What legal documents would accomplish that? The possibilities that occurred to me were all dark. A conservatorship, trying to have me declared incompetent, but that would require medical evidence I wasn't capable of caring for myself, and I'd been managing fine until the surgery. Commitment to a care facility? Again, no grounds for that. I was elderly but healthy, mentally sharp, independent. So what then? I thought about everything that had happened over the past 3 months. Kenneth's sudden affair, his rapid abandonment of his wife and children, his move into an expensive penthouse, Sienna quitting her job immediately after moving in with him, the expensive gifts I'd seen him buying Sienna, jewelry that had to cost tens of thousands of dollars, designer handbags, that luxury car. Where was all that money coming from? Kenneth's business was successful, but he'd just taken on the financial burden of divorce, child support, maintaining 2 households. He shouldn't have that kind of disposable income. A horrible thought occurred to me. I grabbed my phone and opened my banking app, my fingers trembling as I entered my password. I had 3 accounts, a checking account for daily expenses, a savings account with about $45,000, and a CD account with $120,000 that was my retirement safety net and emergency fund. The checking account looked normal. The savings account showed the expected balance. But when I pulled up the CD account, my heart stopped. The balance showed $83,000. I stared at that number, my brain refusing to process what I was seeing. The last time I'd checked this account was about 3 months ago, right around the time Kenneth had announced his affair. It had shown $120,000 then. $37,000 was missing. With shaking hands, I pulled up the transaction history, and there, spread over the past 3 months, were 5 withdrawals. March 15th, $8,000. March 30th, $7,500. April 18th, $6,000. May 5th, $9,000. May 24th, $6,500. Total, $37,000? Each withdrawal was marked as authorized transfer, with a note that said, K. Caldwell, medical power of attorney.
But that document was supposed to be activated only if I was incapacitated or unable to manage my own affairs. I was neither of those things. Kenneth had no legal right to touch my money. Unless he'd told the bank something different. The pieces started falling into place with horrifying clarity. Kenneth had been systematically draining my accounts for 3 months. The timing coincided perfectly with when he'd moved in with Sienna, when he'd started buying her expensive gifts, when his lifestyle had suddenly become more lavish. He was funding his affair with my retirement money. And now, with me in the hospital for surgery, he saw an opportunity to take even more, or maybe to do something worse. That's what the text messages meant. Once the paperwork goes through next month, this will all be over. What paperwork? What was happening next month? I thought about the medical power of attorney. What else had I signed when I'd created that document? I tried to remember, but it had been 7 years ago, and I hadn't thought about it since. Standard healthcare directive, probably. Living will, maybe something about funeral arrangements. And, oh, God, financial power of attorney. Not just medical. I'd given Kenneth full power of attorney for both medical and financial decisions in case something happened to me. It was all in one package, drawn up by a lawyer Kenneth had recommended, signed and notarized, and filed away in a safety deposit box I rarely opened. If Kenneth could somehow prove I was incapacitated, mentally incompetent, unable to make rational decisions, he could take full control of all my assets, my house, my accounts, everything. And a 70-year-old woman who just had surgery, who was in the hospital with an infection, who might seem confused or emotional or not fully in control of her faculties, that would be easy to spin as incompetence, wouldn't it? Especially if her own son was willing to testify that she'd been declining mentally, becoming paranoid, making wild accusations, acting unstable. The paperwork going through next month? A competency hearing? A petition for full guardianship? Once that was in place, Kenneth would have complete control of me. He could move me into a care facility against my will. He could sell my house. He could drain my accounts entirely. And I would be powerless to stop him. "This will all be over," Sienna had said. She meant me. My independence would be over. My autonomy would be over. I would be dealt with, put away somewhere out of sight and out of mind while Kenneth and his mistress enjoyed the money they'd stolen from me. I lay in that hospital bed, the IV antibiotics dripping into my veins, the monitor beeping steadily beside me, and felt a rage unlike anything I'd ever experienced. My son, the boy I raised alone, the child I sacrificed everything for, wasn't just neglecting me, he was planning to destroy me. And he thought I was too old, too sick, too trusting to figure it out or fight back. He had severely underestimated his mother. I didn't sleep that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw those numbers. $37,000 gone, stolen by my own son under the pretense of helping me. The IV antibiotics continued their steady drip, the monitors beeped their reassuring rhythm, but my mind raced with questions that had no easy answers. By 6 a.m., when the morning nurse came in to check my vitals, I was already wide awake, sitting up in bed with my phone in my lap, staring at my bank accounts for the 100th time, hoping the numbers would be somehow different in the morning light. They weren't. "You're up early," the nurse observed, a different woman from Sandra last night. Her name tag read Jennifer. "How are you feeling? Any pain?" "I'm physically better," I said honestly. The fever had broken completely, and while my incisions still ached, it was manageable. But I need to make some phone calls this morning. Is there somewhere private I could go? Maybe a consultation room? Jennifer gave me a knowing look. "Family issues? Something like that. There's a family conference room on this floor that's usually empty in the mornings. Let me check your vitals and wound, and then I'll show you where it is. But Mrs. Caldwell, you need rest, too. Don't push yourself too hard." After Jennifer finished her examination and confirmed that my infection was responding well to the antibiotics, she led me down the hallway to a small conference room with a table, 4 chairs, and a window overlooking the parking lot. It was quiet and private. Exactly what I needed. "Take your time," Jennifer said. "If you need anything, just use the call button. And please, try not to get too stressed. Stress isn't good for healing." I thanked her and closed the door, then sat down at the table and pulled out the list I'd made during the sleepless night. I had a plan now, a plan that required careful execution, absolute secrecy, and a willingness to face some hard truths about my son. First call, my bank. The customer service line connected me to a representative named Marcus Chen after only a 2-minute wait. "First National Bank, this is Marcus. How may I help you today?" "Good morning, Marcus. My name is Dorothy Caldwell, and I need to discuss some unauthorized transactions on my certificate of deposit account." "I'd be happy to help you with that, Mrs. Caldwell. May I have your account number and verify your identity?" I provided the information, answered the security questions, and waited while he pulled up my account. "I see the account here, Mrs. Caldwell. What unauthorized transactions are you concerned about?" There have been 5 withdrawals over the past 3 months, totaling $37,000. They're marked as authorized transfers under medical power of attorney, but I never approved these withdrawals, and the power of attorney should not have been activated because I'm fully competent in managing my own affairs.
There was a pause. I see the transactions you're referring to. Let me pull up the documentation we have on file. Another pause, longer this time, punctuated by keyboard clicks. Mrs. Caldwell, according to our records, these withdrawals were authorized by Kenneth Caldwell under the Durable Financial Power of Attorney document we have on file, dated September 2018. The document grants him authority to manage your financial affairs. That document was supposed to be used only if I became incapacitated or unable to manage my own affairs, I said, my voice hardening. I have been perfectly capable of managing my finances. Did Kenneth provide any medical documentation stating otherwise? More keyboard clicks. I'm seeing... Yes, there's a letter here from Dr. Philip Margrave stating that you were experiencing significant memory issues and confusion, and that it was in your best interest for your son to take over financial management temporarily. My blood ran cold. Dr. Philip Margrave? Yes, ma'am. The letter is dated March 10th of this year. March 10th. 2 days before the first withdrawal. Kenneth had planned this carefully, created a paper trail to justify stealing from me. There was just one problem with his story. Marcus, I don't have a doctor named Philip Margrave. I've never seen a doctor by that name in my life. My primary care physician is Dr. Harrison Chen at Maplewood Heights Medical Center. You can verify that with him. The silence on the other end of the line stretched out uncomfortably. Mrs. Caldwell, are you saying this letter is fraudulent? I'm saying I've never met Dr. Philip Margrave, never been treated by him, and never authorized Kenneth to access my accounts based on a letter from a doctor I've never seen. I want copies of all documentation related to these withdrawals, including that letter. And I want these transactions investigated immediately as potential fraud. I'll need to escalate this to our fraud department. This is a serious allegation. It's a serious crime, I corrected. My son has stolen $37,000 from me using forged medical documentation. I want it investigated, I want the money restored to my account, and I want Kenneth Caldwell's access to my accounts terminated immediately. Mrs. Caldwell, I need to put you on hold while I consult with the supervisor. This may take a few minutes. I'll wait. The hold music was some bland instrumental version of a song I didn't recognize. I sat in that conference room, staring out at the parking lot, watching people come and go from the hospital, and thought about how Kenneth had done this. Dr. Philip Margrave. Was it a real doctor who Kenneth had somehow bribed or convinced to write a false letter? Or was it completely fabricated, a name pulled out of thin air with a forged signature? Either way, it showed premeditation. Kenneth hadn't impulsively stolen from me in a moment of desperation. He'd planned it, created fake documentation, and executed a scheme to systematically drain my accounts. The hold music cut off. Mrs. Caldwell, this is Patricia Donovan, manager of the Fraud Prevention Department. I understand you're reporting unauthorized access to your accounts? I went through everything again with Patricia. The withdrawals, the fake doctor's letter, my lack of any cognitive impairment or need for financial assistance. Patricia listened carefully, asked pointed questions, and took detailed notes. Mrs. Caldwell, I'm going to initiate a formal fraud investigation immediately. We'll need you to come into the branch to file an official report and sign some documents. But I can tell you right now that if what you're saying is accurate, and we'll verify it with Dr. Chen and by attempting to contact this Dr. Margrave, then this is indeed criminal fraud. We'll freeze your son's access to your accounts immediately and work to recover the stolen funds. How long will the investigation take?
Typically 30 to 60 days for a case like this, but we'll work as quickly as possible. In the meantime, I'm placing security alerts on all your accounts to prevent any further unauthorized access. And Mrs. Caldwell, you should consider filing a police report as well. This is identity theft and financial exploitation of an elder, both serious crimes. After I hung up with Patricia, I sat for a long moment, letting that sink in. Filing a police report meant formally accusing Kenneth of a crime. It meant potentially sending my own son to prison. Could I do that? I thought about lying on my bathroom floor, bleeding and feverish, while Kenneth dismissed my desperate pleas as drama. I thought about him planning with Sienna to have me declared incompetent so they could take everything I'd worked my entire life to build. Yes, I absolutely could do that. The lawyer. My next call was to Margaret Pemberton, an attorney who'd helped me with estate planning 5 years ago. I'd chosen her because she was sharp, ethical, and didn't treat elderly clients like they were senile just because they had gray hair. Her secretary put me through immediately when I explained it was urgent. "Dorothy, how are you? It's been years." "I've been better, Margaret. I need your help with a serious problem." I outlined everything. The surgery, tennis abandonment, the stolen money, the fake medical letter, and my suspicion about what the paperwork going through next month might mean. Margaret was silent for a long moment after I finished. When she spoke, her voice was grim. "Dorothy, what you're describing sounds like a planned exploitation scheme. If Kenneth is trying to have you declared incompetent, he would need to file a petition for guardianship or conservatorship. That requires a court hearing, medical evidence, and notification to you as the respondent. Have you received any legal notices?" "Nothing."
Then either he hasn't filed yet or he's planning something else. But based on what you've told me, my biggest concern is that power of attorney document you signed. You said it covers both medical and financial decisions. Yes, that's very broad authority, Dorothy. If Kenneth wanted to, he could use that document to make decisions about your health care, your living situation, your finances, all without needing court approval, as long as he claims he's acting in your best interest. My stomach turned. So he could put me in a nursing home against my will? If he got a doctor to say you couldn't safely live independently, yes, he could have you committed for psychiatric evaluation. He could sell your house. Dorothy, a durable power of attorney is essentially giving someone else complete control over your life. It's meant to be used by someone you trust absolutely. I did trust him. He was my son. I know, and I'm so sorry this is happening. But here's what we need to do immediately. First, you need to revoke that power of attorney document. I can draft a revocation today and have it notarized. We'll file it with the county and send copies to every bank, medical facility, and institution that might have the original on file. Can I do that? Just revoke it? Absolutely. As long as you're mentally competent, which you clearly are, you have the right to revoke a power of attorney at any time. We'll also create a new healthcare directive naming someone else as your medical decision maker. Do you have anyone you trust? A friend, perhaps? I thought about it. Diane would have been my first choice before the divorce, but asking Kenneth's ex-wife to take on that responsibility felt complicated. Gladys was kind, but she was almost as old as I was. What about my attorney? Can I name you? I can serve as your healthcare agent, yes, though I usually recommend naming a family member or close friend. But given your circumstances, I think it's wise to name someone Kenneth can't influence or manipulate. Let's do this. I'll serve as your primary agent, and we'll name a professional fiduciary service as your backup. That way, there's no question about your decision-making being influenced by family dynamics. Yes, do that. Good. Next, we need to document everything. I want you to write down a detailed timeline of events. The surgery, Kenneth's promises, and subsequent abandonment, every text message, every phone call. Save all those messages. Screenshot them if you haven't already. We may need them as evidence. Evidence for what? For several things, potentially. If the bank's fraud investigation leads to criminal charges, the prosecutors will need it. If Kenneth tries to claim you're incompetent, we'll need it to show you're perfectly lucid and that he's been engaging in elder abuse. And Dorothy, I hate to say this, but you should also consider obtaining a restraining order if Kenneth becomes threatening or tries to force you into a care facility. The idea of needing legal protection from my own son made me feel sick, but I couldn't argue with Margaret's logic. Whatever needs to be done, let's do it. I'll have the revocation papers and new healthcare directive ready by this afternoon. Can you come to my office to sign them? I'm in the hospital right now, Maplewood Heights Medical Center. They're keeping me for another day or so because of the infection. Then I'll come to you. What time works? We agreed on 2 p.m. After hanging up, I sat back in my chair, emotionally exhausted but grimly satisfied. I was taking action. I was protecting myself. Kenneth and Sienna thought I was a helpless old woman they could manipulate and rob with impunity. They were about to learn otherwise. Dr. Harrison Chen. My third call that morning was to Dr. Chen's office. His receptionist, Linda, knew me well from my 20 years as a patient. "Dorothy, how are you feeling? Dr. Chen was concerned when he heard about your infection." "I'm doing much better, Linda, thank you. Is Dr. Chen available? I need to speak with him about something important." "He's with a patient right now, but I can have him call you back within an hour." Dr. Chen called me back 40 minutes later. "Dorothy, I'm glad you're responding well to the antibiotics. Dr. Patel is excellent. You're in good hands. What can I do for you?" I took a breath, hating what I was about to ask, but knowing it was necessary. "Dr. Chen, I need you to document something for me. I need a formal letter stating that I'm your patient, that you've been treating me for 20 years, that I have no cognitive impairment or memory issues, and that I'm fully capable of managing my own affairs." "Of course I can provide that. May I ask what this is for?" "I'm dealing with a family situation. It appears someone has been making claims about my mental competence that aren't true. I need documentation proving otherwise." There was a heavy pause. "Dorothy, is someone trying to take advantage of you?" "Yes, but I'm handling it. I just need that letter as soon as possible." "I'll have it today. I'll write it now and have Linda scan it to your email. But Dorothy, if you're being exploited or abused, there are resources available. The hospital has a social worker who specializes in elder abuse cases." "I have a lawyer," I interrupted gently. "And I'm taking all the appropriate steps. But thank you, Dr. Chen. Your concern means more than you know." After we hung up, I sat in that quiet conference room and felt something I hadn't felt in days. Powerful. I was 70 years old, fresh out of surgery, dealing with an infection, abandoned by my son. By all rights, I should have been a perfect victim. Vulnerable, isolated, easy to manipulate.
I was about to return to my room when my phone rang. Diane's name appeared on the screen, and my heart clenched. I hadn't spoken to her since before my surgery, hadn't wanted to burden her with my problems when she was dealing with the divorce and helping Sophia and Marcus adjust to their father's abandonment. "Diane? Hello?" "Dorothy, thank God. I just heard from Gladys that you're in the hospital. Are you okay? Why didn't Kenneth tell me you were having surgery?" Her voice was tight with worry and anger, and I felt tears prick my eyes at the genuine concern in her tone. "I'm okay, sweetheart. I had to have my gallbladder removed, and I developed an infection afterward. They're taking good care of me here." "Where was Kenneth? Gladys said you came to the hospital alone." I hesitated. Diane was dealing with enough. Did she really need to know the full extent of Kenneth's neglect and betrayal? But then I thought about what Margaret had said about documentation, about building a case. And I thought about the fact that Kenneth's actions weren't just hurting me, they were hurting Diane and the children too. They deserved to know what kind of man they were dealing with. "Diane, how much time do you have? There's something I need to tell you, and it's not a short story. I'm on my prep period at school. I have 45 minutes. Tell me everything." So I did. I told her about Kenneth's promises to help after surgery, his subsequent abandonment, the cruel text messages, my discovery of the stolen money and the fake medical letter. I told her about my suspicion that Kenneth was planning something even worse, possibly trying to have me declared incompetent so he could take complete control of my assets. The silence on the other end of the line when I finished was profound. Then Diane spoke, her voice shaking with fury. "That bastard! That absolute bastard, Dorothy! I knew he'd changed, but I had no idea he was capable of something like this. Stealing from his own mother? Creating fake medical documents?" "I'm handling it," I assured her. "I have a lawyer. I've reported the fraud to the bank. I'm revoking his power of attorney. But Diane, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be completely honest with me. Has Kenneth asked you for money recently?" Another pause. "Yes. About a month ago, he said he was short on the mortgage for the penthouse and asked if I could help. I told him absolutely not, that he'd made his choices and I wasn't going to fund his new lifestyle with Sienna. He got angry, said I was being petty and vindictive. We haven't spoken since, except through lawyers." "Good. Don't give him a penny. And Diane, be careful. If he's desperate enough to steal from me, he might try to manipulate the divorce settlement or hide assets. Make sure your divorce attorney knows what's happening." "Oh, I will. Trust me." "Dorothy, what can I do to help you? Do you need anything?" "Actually, yes. I need you to do something that might be difficult. I need you to document everything Kenneth has said or done regarding money over the past few months. Any comments about financial stress, any requests for money, any unusual behavior. I need to build a complete picture of his financial situation and his state of mind. Consider it done. I'll write everything down tonight and email it to you." "Dorothy, I'm so sorry this is happening. You deserve so much better. You've always been nothing but kind and supportive to me, even after Kenneth left. You're more than a mother to me than my own mother ever was." The tears I'd been holding back finally spilled over. "Thank you, sweetheart. That means the world to me." "I love you, Dorothy. You're not alone in this. Sophia and Marcus love you too. We're your family, no matter what Kenneth does." After we hung up, I let myself cry for a few minutes. Not tears of despair or self-pity, but tears of gratitude that I had people who genuinely cared about me, even if my own son didn't. Then I dried my eyes, straightened my spine, and headed back to my hospital room. I had work to do. The social worker. Back in my room, I found a woman waiting for me. She was in her mid-30s, with warm brown eyes and an expression of professional concern. She stood when I entered and extended her hand. "Mrs. Caldwell, I'm Amanda Torres, the hospital social worker. Dr. Patel asked me to stop by and discuss your discharge planning. Do you have a few minutes to talk?" I shook her hand and settled back into my bed, suddenly aware of how tired I was despite my productive morning. "Of course." Amanda pulled up a chair. "First, how are you feeling? Dr. Patel says the infection is responding well to treatment." "Much better, thank you." "I'm glad to hear that. Now, I understand you live alone and you had some difficulties with post-surgical care at home. I want to make sure that doesn't happen again when you're discharged. Do you have family or friends who can stay with you for a few days?" I hesitated. The truth was complicated. My son lives nearby, but our relationship is strained right now. My daughter-in-law, ex-daughter-in-law, has offered to help, but she has her own responsibilities. I have a neighbor who's been very kind. Amanda's expression became more serious.
Mrs. Caldwell, I'm going to be direct with you because I think you're someone who appreciates honesty. Several things in your chart have raised some red flags for me. You came to the hospital alone 3 days after surgery. You had no one listed as an emergency contact. The nurses noted that you seemed distressed after a phone call yesterday. And now you're telling me your relationship with your son is strained. Are you safe at home? The question caught me off guard. Was I safe? Physically, yes. Kenneth wasn't violent. But was I safe from his schemes, his manipulation, his theft? I don't know how to answer that, I admitted. My son isn't going to hurt me physically, but Amanda, if I tell you something in confidence, is it protected?
I'm a mandated reporter for abuse and neglect, Mrs. Caldwell. If you tell me something that indicates you're in danger or being exploited, I'm legally required to report it to Adult Protective Services. But I promise you, my only concern is your safety and well-being. I made a decision. If Kenneth was escalating his scheme, I needed as many people aware of it as possible. Documentation, witnesses, a paper trail that would protect me if things got worse. My son has been stealing from my bank accounts, using a power of attorney I gave him years ago. He created fake medical documentation to justify it. I discovered this last night, and I've already contacted my bank and my attorney to address it. But I'm concerned he might try to do something more, possibly try to have me declared incompetent or commit me to a care facility against my will. Amanda's expression hardened. Mrs. Caldwell, what you're describing is financial exploitation and potential elder abuse. How much money are we talking about? $37,000 so far. She took a sharp breath. That's a significant amount. Have you filed a police report? Not yet, but I plan to. Good. And you've revoked the power of attorney? My attorney is bringing revocation papers this afternoon for me to sign. Amanda nodded approvingly. You're taking all the right steps, but Mrs. Caldwell, I need you to understand something. If your son is desperate enough to steal $37,000 from you, and if he's planning something worse, he may become unpredictable when he realizes you're fighting back. Do you have somewhere safe you can stay when you're discharged? Somewhere he doesn't know about? I hadn't thought about that. My house was the obvious place, but Kenneth had a key. He could show up any time, and if he was planning to have me committed or declared incompetent, my own home might be the first place he'd look. I don't know. Maybe a hotel? There are better options. We have emergency housing programs for vulnerable adults who need temporary safe accommodation. It's not luxurious, but it's secure, and no one can access it without authorization. I can make arrangements if you're interested. Let me think about it. I don't want to uproot my entire life because of Kenneth's actions. That feels like letting him win. I understand. But please, at minimum, change your locks as soon as you get home. Don't let him know where you're staying if you do go somewhere else. And keep your phone with you at all times. If he shows up and becomes threatening, call 911 immediately. After Amanda left, I sat in my bed feeling overwhelmed by the magnitude of what I was facing. This wasn't just about recovering stolen money. This was about protecting myself from someone who was supposed to love me, but had instead decided I was an obstacle to be removed. Margaret Pemberton arrived precisely at 2 p.m., carrying a leather briefcase and wearing her trademark no-nonsense suit. She looked exactly like what she was, a formidable attorney who didn't tolerate people taking advantage of her clients. "Dorothy," she greeted me warmly, then surveyed the hospital room with a critical eye. "How are you feeling?" "Better every hour. Did you bring the papers?" "I did. And I brought something else, a digital recorder. With your permission, I'd like to record your detailed account of everything that has happened. It will be helpful for documentation purposes." I agreed.
And for the next hour, I told Margaret everything in chronological order while she took notes and the recorder captured every word. She asked pointed questions, probing for details, clarifying timeline, making sure we had a complete record. When I finished, Margaret sat back in her chair and studied me with something like admiration in her eyes. Dorothy, I've been practicing elder law for 23 years. I've seen countless cases of financial exploitation, usually perpetrated by caregivers or distant relatives. But this, your son has created a sophisticated scheme that shows premeditation and planning. The fake medical letter, the systematic withdrawals, the apparent plan to have you declared incompetent. This isn't opportunistic theft. This is calculated. I know, I said quietly, and that's what hurts the most. It wasn't a mistake or a moment of weakness. He planned to destroy me. But he made one critical error, Margaret said, pulling documents from her briefcase. He underestimated you. Most elderly people in your situation would be too frightened or confused to fight back effectively. Kenneth counted on that. He didn't expect his mother to figure out what he was doing and take immediate action to protect herself. She spread the documents on the rolling table in front of me. These are the revocation papers for the power of attorney. Once you sign these, Kenneth will have no legal authority over your finances or medical care. I'll file them with the county today and send certified copies to every institution that needs to know. I've also prepared a new healthcare directive naming me as your primary agent and Cornerstone Fiduciary Services as your backup. I read through the documents carefully, making sure I understood every word. Margaret had been thorough. The revocation was absolute and unambiguous. Kenneth would have no power over my life after I signed these papers. I picked up the pen Margaret offered and signed my name on each document, feeling a weight lift off my shoulders with each signature. There, I said, handing the papers back to her. It's done. The easy part is done, Margaret corrected. Now comes the harder part, making sure Kenneth faces consequences for what he's done. Dorothy, I need to ask you directly. Do you want to press charges against your son?
I thought about Diane and Sophia and Marcus, victims of Kenneth's selfishness. I thought about the elderly people who didn't have the resources or the support system to fight back against financial exploitation. I thought about the person I'd raised Kenneth to be versus the person he'd become. Yes, I said firmly, I want to press charges. What he's done is criminal, and he needs to face the consequences. Margaret nodded. Then here's what we'll do. I'm going to contact a detective I know in the Financial Crimes Unit of the Maplewood Heights Police Department. His name is Detective Raymond Shaw, and he specializes in elder financial exploitation cases. I'll give him all the documentation we have so far, the bank records, the fake medical letter, the timeline, your recorded statement. He'll open an investigation. How long will that take? It varies, but given how clear-cut the evidence is, I'd expect them to move fairly quickly. In the meantime, you need to be prepared for Kenneth to react badly when he discovers what you've done. Men like him, men who feel entitled to control others, often become aggressive when that control is challenged. The social worker suggested I consider staying somewhere other than my home when I'm discharged. That's good advice. Even if it's just for a few weeks while the initial investigation is underway and Kenneth processes that he can't manipulate you anymore. Do you have somewhere you could go? I thought about it. Diane's house? No, that would put her and the children in an uncomfortable position. A hotel? Expensive and isolating. Then I remembered something. My friend Ruth Blackwell from my bridge club has a vacation cottage on Whidbey Island. She's mentioned several times that I could use it whenever I wanted. Maybe I could stay there for a few weeks while I recover and while this investigation gets underway. That sounds perfect. Quiet, peaceful, away from Kenneth. Give her a call and make arrangements. I'll come visit you there once you're settled to update you on the investigation's progress. After Margaret left with all the signed documents, I felt simultaneously exhausted and energized. I'd taken decisive action to protect myself. I'd cut off Kenneth's access to my finances and medical decisions. I'd set in motion legal consequences for his crimes. But I also felt sad. Sad that this was necessary. Sad that my relationship with my son had deteriorated to the point where I needed lawyers and police involvement to protect myself from him. Sad for the future we wouldn't have together, for the grandmother-grandchildren relationship that would inevitably suffer because of his choices. I called Ruth, who was horrified by what had happened, and immediately insisted I stay at her cottage for as long as I needed. "It's fully furnished, Dorothy. I'll have my caretaker stock the refrigerator and get everything ready for you. You just focus on healing. And Dorothy, that son of yours needs a good slap upside the head. I never liked him anyway. Always thought he was too slick by half." Her fierce loyalty made me smile for the first time that day. The confrontation. I was dozing in my hospital bed around 5 p.m. when I heard voices in the hallway outside my room. Raised, agitated voices that penetrated through my drowsy state and made my heart start racing. "I don't care what the rules are. That's my mother in there, and I have every right to see her." Kenneth was here, and from the sound of it, he was not happy. "Sir, visiting hours don't start until 6 p.m., and Mrs. Caldwell specifically requested that we notify her before allowing any visitors to her room. That's ridiculous. I'm her son. I don't need her permission to visit her in the hospital." I pressed the call button beside my bed. Jennifer answered immediately. "Mrs. Caldwell, I'm so sorry about the disturbance. Your son is here and insisting on seeing you. Would you like me to have security remove him?" Part of me wanted to say yes, wanted to avoid the confrontation entirely. But another part of me, the part that had spent all day taking action, building my case, protecting myself, knew that avoiding Kenneth wouldn't make the situation go away. "Let him in," I said. "But Jennifer, please stay close. If I press the call button again, I want security in here immediately." "Understood. I'll be right outside." A moment later, Kenneth burst into my room, his face flush with anger and something else. Fear, maybe, or panic. He stopped short when he saw me sitting up in bed, looking at him with cool, composed eyes. "Mom," he began, his voice softening slightly. "I've been so worried about you. Why wouldn't you let me visit earlier?" "Because I needed time to handle some things without interference from you," I said calmly. "Close the door, Kenneth. We need to talk." He closed the door and approached my bed, his hands spread in a gesture of innocence. "Mom, I know you're upset with me about missing your surgery and not being there when you needed help. I'm sorry, I really am. Work has been insane and—" "Stop. Just stop," I interrupted. "I don't want to hear your excuses or your lies. I know what you've been doing, Kenneth. I know everything." His face went carefully blank. "I don't know what you mean."
$37,000. That's what you've stolen from my CD account over the past 3 months, using a power of attorney that was never supposed to be activated, using a fake letter from a doctor I've never seen, claiming I have memory issues and confusion. The color drained from Kenneth's face. "Mom, that's not— I can explain. Dr. Philip Margrave? Does he even exist, Kenneth? Or did you forge that entire letter?" "I was trying to help you," Kenneth said, his voice rising defensively. "You were having trouble managing your finances, forgetting to pay bills." "I have never forgotten to pay a bill in my life. I have never had any cognitive issues. The only thing wrong with my finances is that my son has been systematically stealing from me to fund his affair with a woman half his age." Kenneth's jaw clenched. "Sienna has nothing to do with this." "Doesn't she? You didn't start stealing from me until you moved in with her. You didn't create fake medical documentation until you needed to justify expensive gifts and a luxury lifestyle you couldn't afford. She's everything to do with this.
You don't understand our relationship. You've never even tried to get to know her. I know she thinks I am dramatic and clingy. I know she told you to ignore my pleas for help when I was bleeding on my bathroom floor after surgery. I know she's counting the days until the paperwork goes through and dealing with me will be over. Should I go on? Kenneth's eyes widened. How did you... The text messages. You saw the group chat. Yes. You added me by accident, and I got to see exactly what you and your mistress really think of me. She does this for attention. The less time we waste on her, the better. Those were your words, Kenneth, about your mother, about the woman who raised you alone after your father died, who worked herself to exhaustion to give you every opportunity. Mom, what paperwork, Kenneth? What's happening next month that's going to make dealing with me unnecessary? He opened his mouth, closed it again. His eyes darted around the room like he was looking for an escape route. Were you planning to have me declared incompetent? Have me committed somewhere against my will? Maybe sell my house and take everything I've spent a lifetime building? Kenneth's face crumpled, not with remorse, but with frustration at being caught. It wasn't supposed to be like this. You were supposed to be taken care of. A nice facility, comfortable, where you wouldn't have to worry about anything. A facility where I'd be warehoused and drugged and have no control over my own life while you liquidated my assets and spent my money? My voice was rising now, years of suppressed anger finally breaking free. Don't you dare try to spin your theft and betrayal as concern for my welfare. I needed the money, Kenneth shouted, his composure finally shattering. Do you have any idea how expensive the divorce is? How much it costs to maintain the lifestyle Sienna expects? The penthouse alone is $8,000 a month, and Diane got the house and half my savings. And so you decided to steal from your elderly mother instead of living within your means? You chose a mistress over your wife and children, and when that choice had consequences, you decided I should pay for it? You have more money than you need. Kenneth's face was red now, veins standing out on his forehead. That house is paid off. You have your pension. You don't need $120,000 sitting in a CD account doing nothing. I was going to pay you back once the Riverside development pays out. Except you weren't going to pay me back, were you? You were going to have me declared incompetent and take everything legally. No need to repay money from someone who's been committed to a memory care facility. His silence was answer enough. Here's what's going to happen, I said, my voice deadly calm. You are never going to access my accounts again. I've revoked the power of attorney, I've reported the theft to the bank, I've hired an attorney, and Kenneth, I've filed a police report for financial exploitation and fraud. His face went white. You did what? I reported you for stealing from me, which is exactly what you did. The detective will probably want to speak with you in the next few days. Mom, you can't do this. I'm your son. This will ruin me, my business, my reputation. You should have thought about that before you decided to rob me, I said coldly. You made your choices, Kenneth. Now you get to live with them. Please. Kenneth's anger collapsed into desperation. He reached for my hand, but I pulled it away. Mom, please. I made mistakes. I panicked. But we can fix this. I'll return the money, all of it. We don't need to involve the police or lawyers. This can stay in the family. There is no family anymore, Kenneth. You destroyed that when you chose Sienna over your wife, your children, and your mother. When you decided my life savings was yours to steal. When you planned to have me locked away in a facility so you could take everything I have. I would have made sure you were comfortable. Stop lying, I shouted, startling both of us. Just stop. I'm done with your lies and your manipulation and your excuses. You stole from me. You abandoned me when I needed you most. You planned to destroy what's left of my life so you could finance an affair with a woman younger than your daughter. Those are facts, Kenneth. No amount of spin or rationalization changes them.
Kenneth stood there, his shoulders slumped,
looking like he'd aged 10 years in 10 minutes. "What do you want from me?" "I want you to leave. I want you to stay away from me. And I want you to think very carefully about the person you've become and whether that's really who you want to be." "Mom, get out. Please, just listen." I pressed the call button. Within seconds, Jennifer appeared in the doorway with a security guard behind her. "Mrs. Caldwell?" "My son is leaving now," I said, not taking my eyes off Kenneth. "Please escort him out." Kenneth looked at me with something like anguish in his eyes. "Mom, I'm sorry. I know I've messed up, but please don't do this. Don't destroy what's left of our relationship." "You destroyed it, not me, you." I watched as the security guard, a tall, muscular man who looked like he'd enjoy an excuse to use force, guided Kenneth toward the door. Kenneth looked back once, his face a mask of pain and anger and fear. Then he was gone. I sat in that hospital bed, trembling from the adrenaline and emotion, feeling both victorious and devastated. I'd stood up for myself. I'd refused to be manipulated or bullied. I'd set boundaries and enforced consequences. But I'd also just severed my relationship with my only child, possibly permanently. Jennifer came back in, her face concerned. "Mrs. Caldwell, are you okay? Your blood pressure is elevated on the monitor." "I'll be fine," though I wasn't sure that was true. "Is he gone?" Security walked him all the way to the parking lot. They've also flagged his name in our system. He won't be allowed back in the hospital without your explicit permission. "Good. Thank you, Jennifer." After she left, I lay back against my pillows and closed my eyes, feeling the weight of everything that had happened crash over me. In less than 24 hours, I'd discovered my son's betrayal, contacted the bank and a lawyer, revoked his power of attorney, filed a police report, and confronted him directly. I'd burned every bridge between us. But I'd also protected myself. I'd refused to be a victim. And maybe, just maybe, I'd shown Kenneth that actions have consequences. My phone buzzed with a text message. For a moment, I feared it was Kenneth, but the name on the screen was Margaret Pemberton. "Detective Shaw wants to meet with you tomorrow at 10 a.m. if you're feeling up to it. He says the case is strong and he wants to move quickly. How are you doing?" I typed back, "Tell him I'll be ready. And Margaret, thank you for everything." Her response came immediately. "You're doing great, Dorothy. You're stronger than you know." I set the phone aside and stared at the ceiling, thinking about strength. I'd always thought strength meant enduring, suffering in silence, keeping the family together at any cost. That's what I'd done for so many years. Endured Thomas's death alone, worked myself to exhaustion to provide for Kenneth, accepted his choices even when they hurt me. But maybe real strength was knowing when to stop enduring, when to say enough, when to protect yourself even if it meant standing alone. That evening, after a quiet dinner of hospital food that I barely tasted, I sat down with a notebook and began writing. Not a journal entry or a letter, but a plan. Immediate priorities. Meet with Detective Shaw tomorrow at 10 a.m. Arrange transportation to Ruth's cottage on Whidbey Island. Change all passwords on email, banking, and online accounts. Install security cameras at my house before leaving. Get new locks installed, call the locksmith today. Create comprehensive documentation file with all evidence. Short-term goals: recover the $37,000 stolen from my accounts, ensure criminal charges proceed against Kenneth, establish new support system, separate from Kenneth, complete physical recovery from surgery, consider therapy to process the emotional trauma. Long-term considerations:
update will and estate planning, remove Kenneth as a beneficiary, rebuild relationship with Diane, Sophia, and Marcus, decide whether to sell house or stay in Maplewood Heights, find new attorney to handle estate planning going forward, create safeguards to prevent future exploitation. Looking at that list, I felt overwhelmed but also focused. I had a path forward. I had concrete steps I could take to protect myself and rebuild my life. The hardest question was at the bottom of the page, the one I'd been avoiding thinking about directly. What about Kenneth? Did I want him in my life at all after this? Could our relationship ever recover from such a fundamental betrayal? And even if I could forgive him someday, could I ever trust him again? I didn't have answers. Not yet. Maybe I never would. But I knew one thing with absolute certainty. I would never again put myself in a position where someone, even my own son, had the power to control my life, my finances, or my future. I had spent 70 years learning to be independent, learning to survive, learning to build a life on my own terms. Kenneth had tried to take that away from me. He failed. And I was going to make damn sure he understood just how badly he miscalculated when he decided his elderly mother would be an easy target. Tomorrow, I would meet with Detective Shaw and give him everything he needed to build a case against Kenneth. I would document every lie, every theft, every moment of betrayal. And then I would leave Maplewood Heights for a while, give myself space to heal physically and emotionally, and figure out who Dorothy Caldwell was going to be in this next chapter of her life. A chapter that would be written entirely on my own terms, with no one controlling the narrative but me. I closed the notebook and turned off the light, feeling something I hadn't felt since before my surgery. Hope. Not hope for reconciliation with Kenneth, not hope that things would go back to the way they were, but maybe, just maybe, I was stronger than anyone, including myself, had given me credit for.
Kenneth stood there, his shoulders slumped, looking like he'd aged 10 years in 10 minutes. What do you want from me? I want you to leave. I want you to stay away from me. And I want you to think very carefully about the person you've become and whether that's really who you want to be. Mom, get out. Please, just listen. I pressed the call button. Within seconds, Jennifer appeared in the doorway with a security guard behind her. Mrs. Caldwell? My son is leaving now, I said, not taking my eyes off Kenneth. Please escort him out. Kenneth looked at me with something like anguish in his eyes. Mom, I'm sorry. I know I've messed up, but please don't do this. Don't destroy what's left of our relationship. You destroyed it, not me, you. I watched as the security guard, a tall, muscular man who looked like he'd enjoy an excuse to use force, guided Kenneth toward the door. Kenneth looked back once, his face a mask of pain and anger and fear. Then he was gone. I sat in that hospital bed, trembling from the adrenaline and emotion, feeling both victorious and devastated. I'd stood up for myself. I'd refused to be manipulated or bullied. I'd set boundaries and enforced consequences. But I'd also just severed my relationship with my only child, possibly permanently. Jennifer came back in, her face concerned. Mrs. Caldwell, are you okay? Your blood pressure is elevated on the monitor. I'll be fine, though I wasn't sure that was true. Is he gone? Security walked him all the way to the parking lot. They've also flagged his name in our system. He won't be allowed back in the hospital without your explicit permission. Good. Thank you, Jennifer. After she left, I lay back against my pillows and closed my eyes, feeling the weight of everything that had happened crash over me. In less than 24 hours, I'd discovered my son's betrayal, contacted the bank and a lawyer, revoked his power of attorney, filed a police report, and confronted him directly. I'd burned every bridge between us. But I'd also protected myself. I'd refused to be a victim. And maybe, just maybe, I'd shown Kenneth that actions have consequences. My phone buzzed with a text message. For a moment, I feared it was Kenneth, but the name on the screen was Margaret Pemberton. Detective Shaw wants to meet with you tomorrow at 10 a.m. if you're feeling up to it. He says the case is strong and he wants to move quickly. How are you doing? I typed back, tell him I'll be ready. And Margaret, thank you for everything. Her response came immediately. You're doing great, Dorothy. You're stronger than you know. I set the phone aside and stared at the ceiling, thinking about strength. I'd always thought strength meant enduring, suffering in silence, keeping the family together at any cost. That's what I'd done for so many years. Endured Thomas's death alone, worked myself to exhaustion to provide for Kenneth, accepted his choices even when they hurt me. But maybe real strength was knowing when to stop enduring, when to say enough, when to protect yourself even if it meant standing alone. That evening, after a quiet dinner of hospital food that I barely tasted, I sat down with a notebook and began writing. Not a journal entry or a letter, but a plan. Immediate priorities. Meet with Detective Shaw tomorrow at 10 a.m. Arrange transportation to Ruth's cottage on Whidbey Island. Change all passwords on email, banking, and online accounts. Install security cameras at my house before leaving. Get new locks installed, call the locksmith today. Create comprehensive documentation file with all evidence. Short-term goals: recover the $37,000 stolen from my accounts, ensure criminal charges proceed against Kenneth, establish new support system separate from Kenneth, complete physical recovery from surgery. Consider therapy to process the emotional trauma. Long-term considerations: update will and estate planning, remove Kenneth as a beneficiary, rebuild relationship with Diane, Sophia, and Marcus, decide whether to sell house or stay in Maplewood Heights, find new attorney to handle estate planning going forward, create safeguards to prevent future exploitation. Looking at that list, I felt overwhelmed but also focused. I had a path forward. I had concrete steps I could take to protect myself and rebuild my life. The hardest question was at the bottom of the page, the one I'd been avoiding thinking about directly. What about Kenneth? Did I want him in my life at all after this? Could our relationship ever recover from such a fundamental betrayal? And even if I could forgive him someday, could I ever trust him again? I didn't have answers. Not yet. Maybe I never would. But I knew one thing with absolute certainty. I would never again put myself in a position where someone, even my own son, had the power to control my life, my finances, or my future. I had spent 70 years learning to be independent, learning to survive, learning to build a life on my own terms. Kenneth had tried to take that away from me. He failed. And I was going to make damn sure he understood just how badly he miscalculated when he decided his elderly mother would be an easy target. Tomorrow, I would meet with Detective Shaw and give him everything he needed to build a case against Kenneth. I would document every lie, every theft, every moment of betrayal. And then I would leave Maplewood Heights for a while, give myself space to heal physically and emotionally, and figure out who Dorothy Caldwell was going to be in this next chapter of her life.
A chapter that would be written entirely on my own terms, with no one controlling the narrative but me. I closed the notebook and turned off the light, feeling something I hadn't felt since before my surgery. Hope. Not hope for reconciliation with Kenneth, not hope that things would go back to the way they were, but maybe, just maybe, I was stronger than anyone, including myself, had given me credit for.
And hope that the next 70 years of my life, however many I had left, would be spent living on my own terms, answering to no one, and never again allowing anyone to make me feel small or helpless or disposable. I fell asleep with that thought, and for the first time in days, I didn't dream of Kenneth's betrayal. I dreamed of freedom. The next morning, Detective Raymond Shaw arrived at my hospital room at exactly 10 a.m. He was a man in his early 50s, with salt and pepper hair, kind eyes that had seen too much, and the methodical demeanor of someone who took his job seriously. "Mrs. Caldwell, thank you for agreeing to meet with me," he said, setting up a digital recorder on my bedside table after I gave him permission. "Margaret Pemberton has provided me with extensive documentation, but I'd like to hear the story directly from you." For the third time in 2 days, I recounted everything. The surgery, Kenneth's abandonment, the stolen money, the fake medical letter, the text messages, yesterday's confrontation. Detective Shaw took notes, asked clarifying questions, and requested copies of all the text messages and bank statements. "Mrs. Caldwell, what you're describing constitutes several crimes," he said when I finished. "Financial exploitation of a vulnerable adult, identity theft, forgery, if that doctor's letter is fake, which I'm confident it is, and potentially fraud. The fact that the perpetrator is your son doesn't change the criminality of his actions." "I understand," I said quietly, "and I want to proceed with pressing charges." Detective Shaw nodded. "I need to be honest with you about what that means. This will likely go to trial unless Kenneth accepts a plea deal. You may have to testify against your own son in court. The media might pick up the story. Elder financial abuse cases sometimes attract attention. Your family relationships will be permanently affected. Are you prepared for all of that?" I thought about Sophia and Marcus, my grandchildren who would grow up knowing their father was convicted of stealing from their grandmother. I thought about the whispers in Maplewood Heights, the judgment, the scandal. I thought about the finality of it all. Then I thought about the hundreds of other elderly people who suffered financial exploitation in silence because they were too ashamed or too afraid to speak up. I thought about Sienna and Kenneth potentially doing this to someone else if they faced no consequences. "I'm prepared," I said firmly. "What Kenneth did was wrong. He needs to be held accountable." "Then here's what happens next," Detective Shaw said. "I'm going to obtain warrants for Kenneth's financial records, phone records, and any documentation related to that fake medical letter. I'll interview him formally. He'll probably lawyer up immediately, which is his right. The bank's fraud investigation will feed into our criminal investigation. Within a few weeks, I expect we'll have enough evidence to arrest Kenneth and charge him formally." "What about Sienna? She was clearly involved in planning this." "That's harder to prove unless we can demonstrate she directly participated in the theft or fraud. Being a morally reprehensible person who encouraged your son to steal isn't technically a crime, but I'll look into her involvement. Sometimes in cases like this, one person turns on the other to get a better plea deal." After Detective Shaw left, promising to keep me updated on the investigation's progress, I felt a strange sense of peace. The wheels of justice were turning. I'd done everything I could to protect myself and ensure consequences for Kenneth's actions. Now, I needed to focus on healing, physically and emotionally. Leaving the hospital. Dr. Patel discharged me that afternoon with strict instructions. Complete the antibiotic course, keep the wounds clean, no heavy lifting for 2 more weeks,
and follow up with Dr. Chen in 1 week. You're healing beautifully, she said, examining my incision sites one final time. The infection is completely resolved. But, Mrs. Caldwell, I want you to take care of your emotional health, too. What you've been through with your son, that's traumatic. Consider talking to someone professional about it. I will, I promised. And I meant it. Riley, the taxi driver who had helped me to the emergency room, insisted on driving me home when I called her number. She refused payment again. You remind me of my grandma, she said as we drove through Maplewood Heights toward my house. She got taken advantage of by family too, didn't have anyone to help her fight back. So I'm glad you did. You're a badass, Mrs. Caldwell. I laughed, actually laughed, for the first time in days. I'm not sure anyone's ever called me that before. Well, they should. Standing up to your own kid when he's stealing from you, that takes guts. At my house, I found that Margaret had already arranged for a locksmith. A young man named Carlos was waiting on my porch with new locks and a security system ready to install. Miss Pemberton said to make this place Fort Knox, Carlos said. Nobody's getting in here without you knowing about it. While Carlos worked, I walked through my house, seeing it with new eyes. This was mine, my sanctuary, my home that I'd paid for with decades of hard work. Kenneth would never have the power to take it from me. I changed into comfortable clothes, made myself tea, and sat in my kitchen, the same kitchen where I'd cooked thousands of meals for Kenneth when he was growing up, where we'd done homework together, where we'd celebrated birthdays and holidays and ordinary Tuesday evenings. So many memories in these walls, so much love and sacrifice and hope. I let myself grieve for what was lost. Not just my relationship with Kenneth, but the version of him that I believed in, the good man, the loving son, the person who would never hurt me. That person either never existed or had died somewhere along the way, replaced by someone I didn't recognize.
Over the next 3 weeks, living in peaceful isolation at Ruth's cottage on Woodby Island, I watched the investigation unfold through regular updates from Detective Shaw and Margaret. Kenneth had indeed lawyered up immediately with an expensive criminal defense attorney named Stuart Brennan. But the evidence was overwhelming. The bank confirmed that Dr. Philip Margrave didn't exist. The medical license number on the letter was fake. The signature was forged. Everything about it was fraudulent. Kenneth's phone records showed extensive communication with Sienna about my finances, including text messages where they discussed how much money they could access from my accounts and how to keep me from noticing. Most damning of all, Sienna had gotten sloppy. She'd posted on social media about their expensive lifestyle, photos of designer purchases, luxury vacations, bottles of wine that cost more than most people's monthly grocery budget. Posts that were time-stamped to coincide exactly with withdrawals from my account. Detective Shaw called me on a Tuesday morning 3 weeks after I'd left the hospital. Mrs. Caldwell, I wanted you to hear this from me first. We arrested Kenneth this morning. He's been charged with financial exploitation of a vulnerable adult, identity theft, forgery, and wire fraud. Total of 4 felony counts. My hand trembled as I held the phone. I'd known this was coming, had wanted it to happen, but hearing it still felt surreal. How did he react? His attorney advised him not to say anything, but Mrs. Caldwell, he looked defeated. I think reality is finally setting in about what he's done and what it's going to cost him. What happens now? Arraignment in 2 days. His attorney will probably try to negotiate a plea deal to avoid trial. If Kenneth is smart, he'll take it. If this goes to trial, he's looking at significant prison time, potentially 8 to 10 years given the amount stolen and the deliberate fraud involved. After hanging up, I sat on the cottage porch overlooking Puget Sound, watching the waves roll in, feeling the salt breeze on my face. I'd done it. I'd stood up for myself, refused to be a victim, and ensured that Kenneth faced consequences for his crimes. But why did I feel so empty? Diane's visit. 2 days later, Diane drove up to Whidbey Island with Sophia and Marcus. I hadn't seen my grandchildren since before the surgery,
And when they ran up the cottage steps and threw their arms around me, I finally cried, not from sadness, but from overwhelming love and relief. "Grandma Dorothy," Marcus said, squeezing me tight, "Mom said you were sick. Are you better now?" "I'm much better, sweetheart, much better." Sophia, more aware at 15 of the family drama, held me longer. "Grandma, we heard about Dad, about what he did to you. I'm so sorry." "Oh, honey, that's not your burden to carry. What your father did, that was his choice, not yours." While the kids explored the beach, Diane and I sat on the porch with coffee, watching them throw stones into the water. "Kenneth called me from jail," Diane said quietly. "He wanted me to bail him out, to tell the kids this was all a misunderstanding." "What did you say?" "I said no, to all of it. I told him he made his choices and now he gets to live with them." "Dorothy, I want you to know the kids and I are on your side completely. What Kenneth did was unforgivable." "He's still their father," I said gently. "I don't want my decision to press charges to damage your children's relationship with him. Their father damaged that relationship himself when he abandoned them for Sienna and then stole from his own mother. Sophia told me yesterday that she doesn't want to see him again. Marcus is confused, but he's angry too. They need time to process this, and they need to know that actions have consequences, even for parents." We sat in comfortable silence for a while, then Diane said, "Kenneth's business is collapsing. The Riverside development investors pulled out when the news broke about his arrest. Sienna left him, moved out of the penthouse the day he was arrested, and hasn't answered his calls since. He's lost everything." I should have felt satisfaction at that. Instead, I just felt sad. Sad that Kenneth had destroyed his own life chasing money and status and a woman who never loved him, just what he could provide. The prosecutor offered him a plea deal: 4 years in prison, full restitution of the stolen money, and 5 years of probation after release. His attorney is recommending he take it. 4 years, I repeated. 4 years of Kenneth's life behind bars. 4 years of Sophia and Marcus growing up without their father. 4 years of holidays and birthdays and graduations he would miss. But also 4 years for Kenneth to think about who he'd become and who he wanted to be when he got out. "Will you go to the sentencing hearing?" Diane asked. "I don't know," I admitted. "Part of me wants to. Part of me never wants to see him again." A week later, a letter arrived at the cottage, forwarded from my house in Maplewood Heights. Kenneth's handwriting on the envelope. I stared at it for a full day before opening it, afraid of what it might say, afraid of how it might make me feel. Finally, I sat down at the kitchen table and carefully opened the envelope. "Dear Mom, I don't expect you to forgive me. I don't deserve your forgiveness, but I need you to know that I'm sorry, truly, deeply sorry for what I did to you. I've spent the past month in jail with nothing to do but think about my choices, about how I got here, about the man I used to be versus the person I became. I don't have excuses. I was selfish. I was greedy. I let Sienna manipulate me into believing I deserved a lifestyle I hadn't earned, and I convinced myself that taking your money was somehow justified because you didn't need it or because I'd pay it back eventually."
Those were lies I told myself to avoid facing the truth. I stole from you. I planned to have you declared incompetent so I could steal even more. I abandoned you after surgery when you needed me most. I chose a woman I barely knew over the mother who sacrificed everything for me. I understand now what I threw away. My marriage to Diane, a woman who loved me unconditionally. My children, Sophia won't even take my calls now. My relationship with you, the most important relationship in my life, destroyed by my own greed and stupidity. And for what? Sienna left me the day I was arrested. The business I was so obsessed with protecting is gone. The lifestyle I thought I needed turned out to be empty and meaningless. I'm taking the plea deal. 4 years in prison. It's less than I deserve, honestly. Maybe it will give me time to figure out how to be a better person, how to be the man you raised me to be instead of the one I became. I don't ask for your forgiveness.
I don't ask for anything. I just wanted you to know that I'm sorry, that I take full responsibility for what I did, and that you were right about everything. I love you, Mom. I know I have a terrible way of showing it, but I do love you. I hope someday you can think of me without hating me. Kenneth. I read the letter 3 times, tears streaming down my face. It was everything I'd wanted to hear from him. Acknowledgement of his crimes, genuine remorse, understanding of what he had lost. But it was also too late. The damage was done. Our relationship was irreparably broken. Maybe someday, years from now, we could rebuild something. Maybe after Kenneth served his time and proved through actions rather than words that he'd changed, we could have some version of a relationship again. But not now. Not yet. Possibly not ever. I folded the letter carefully and put it in a drawer. Then I walked out onto the cottage porch and let the ocean breeze dry my tears. 6 months later. Kenneth accepted the plea deal. 4 years in prison, full restitution, 5 years probation. At the sentencing hearing, which I attended after much deliberation, he stood before the judge and took full responsibility for his actions. I betrayed my mother's trust, he said, his voice breaking. I exploited her vulnerability after surgery. I created fraudulent documents to steal from her. There's no excuse for what I did. I deserve whatever punishment this court deems appropriate. The judge, a stern woman in her 60s named Judge Patricia Morrison, didn't go easy on him. Mr. Caldwell, elder financial exploitation is one of the most despicable crimes we see in this court. You didn't steal from a stranger. You stole from the woman who gave you life, who raised you alone after your father died, who sacrificed her own dreams to ensure you had opportunities. That betrayal is particularly egregious. 4 years is lenient considering the severity of your actions. I hope you use that time to become the man your mother deserved to have as a son. I didn't speak to Kenneth that day. I sat in the gallery, watched him be led away in handcuffs, and then I left the courthouse with Diane, Sophia, and Marcus. My granddaughter held my hand as we walked to the car. "Are you okay, Grandma?" "I will be, sweetheart. It takes time, but I'll be okay." And slowly, I was. The bank returned the stolen $37,000. I used part of it to take Diane and the kids on a vacation to Victoria, British Columbia, a trip filled with laughter and healing and new memories that weren't tainted by Kenneth's betrayal. I sold the house in Maplewood Heights. Too many memories, too much pain. Instead, I bought a smaller cottage near Ruth's place on Whidbey Island, where I could hear the ocean and watch the eagles soar and find peace in the natural beauty around me. Margaret helped me create airtight estate planning documents. My assets would go to Sophia and Marcus directly, held in trust until they turned 25. Kenneth would get nothing, not out of spite, but because I couldn't trust him not to squander or steal it again. I joined a support group for survivors of elder financial abuse. Hearing other people's stories, realizing I wasn't alone in what I had experienced, helped more than I had expected. I even started volunteering with an organization that helped elderly people protect themselves from financial exploitation. Turning my pain into purpose gave me something I hadn't had in years, a sense of meaning beyond just surviving. The final chapter. 1 year after Kenneth's arrest, I stood on my cottage porch watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of orange and pink.
My 71st birthday had just passed, celebrated with Diane and the kids, with Ruth and her family, with new friends I'd made on the island. My phone rang. Margaret Pemberton. Dorothy, I have news. Kenneth is eligible for early release if he completes a rehabilitation program in prison. He's applied, and he's listed you as someone he wants to make amends to as part of the program. You don't have to participate, but I wanted you to know he's asking. I thought about it, about the son I'd loved so fiercely, who'd hurt me so deeply, about forgiveness and consequences, about second chances and protecting yourself, about love and boundaries and the complicated mess of family relationships. I told him, I'm willing to consider it, I said finally, after he served his full sentence and proven through actions rather than words that he changed. Maybe then we can have a conversation, but Margaret, make sure he understands that even if I someday forgive him, things will never go back to how they were. He destroyed that possibility. I'll tell him. Dorothy, how are you doing? Really?
I looked out at the ocean, at the life I'd built for myself after everything fell apart, at the peace I'd found in letting go of who I thought my son should be and accepting who he actually was. I'm happy, I said, surprised to realize it was true. For the first time in years, maybe in decades, I'm genuinely happy. I'm free from the burden of making excuses for Kenneth, free from worrying about maintaining relationships with people who don't respect me, free to live my life on my own terms. That's the best revenge, Margaret said with a smile in her voice, living well. After we hung up, I stayed on the porch as darkness fell and stars began appearing overhead. I thought about the woman who'd lain bleeding on a bathroom floor, desperate and alone, feeling like her life was ending. That woman had been stronger than she knew. She'd fought back. She'd refused to be a victim. She'd demanded justice and gotten it. And now she was finally at peace. The journey hadn't been easy. There were still hard days when I missed the son Kenneth used to be, or the son I'd believed he was. Days when I second-guessed my decision to press charges, wondering if I should have just let it go, kept the family together at any cost. But then I'd remember that text message. She's just being dramatic. Let her figure it out herself. I'd remember lying on that cold bathroom floor, bleeding and abandoned, and I'd know I'd made the right choice. Because protecting myself wasn't selfish, demanding respect wasn't unreasonable, and refusing to enable someone's criminal behavior, even when that someone was your own child, wasn't cruel. It was necessary. It was survival. It was self-love. At 71 years old, I'd finally learned the most important lesson of all. You teach people how to treat you. And if they refuse to treat you with basic human dignity, you have every right to walk away, even if walking away means sending them to prison. I went inside my cottage, made myself chamomile tea, and sat down with a photo album Diane had given me. Pictures of Sophia and Marcus at various ages, smiling and laughing and growing up beautiful and kind, despite their father's failures. These were my legacy now. Not Kenneth, but the grandchildren who loved me unconditionally, who called me every week, who made me cards for my birthday, and told me I was brave. The next generation who would grow up knowing that standing up for yourself, even when it's hard, even when it hurts, is always the right choice. I closed the album and smiled. After surgery, I'd begged for help with a text, and no one had answered. But in the silence that followed, I'd found something even more valuable than help. I'd found myself. Dorothy's story is one of courage, resilience, and reclaiming power after betrayal.
She discovered that sometimes the people who are supposed to love us most are the ones who hurt us worst. But she also learned that she was strong enough to survive it and even thrive afterward. If you or someone you love is experiencing financial exploitation or elder abuse, please reach out to Adult Protective Services or local authorities. You deserve to be treated with dignity and respect, no matter your age. Thank you for following Dorothy's journey to the end. Comment below with your thoughts on her story. What city are you from? What would you have done in her situation? Your engagement helps stories like this reach people who need to hear them.
I looked out at the ocean, at the life I'd built for myself after everything fell apart, at the peace I'd found in letting go of who I thought my son should be and accepting who he actually was. "I'm happy," I said, surprised to realize it was true. For the first time in years, maybe in decades, I'm genuinely happy. I'm free from the burden of making excuses for Kenneth, free from worrying about maintaining relationships with people who don't respect me, free to live my life on my own terms. "That's the best revenge," Margaret said with a smile in her voice, "living well." After we hung up, I stayed on the porch as darkness fell and stars began appearing overhead. I thought about the woman who'd lain bleeding on a bathroom floor, desperate and alone, feeling like her life was ending. That woman had been stronger than she knew. She'd fought back. She'd refused to be a victim. She'd demanded justice and gotten it. And now she was finally at peace. The journey hadn't been easy. There were still hard days when I missed the son Kenneth used to be, or the son I'd believed he was. Days when I second-guessed my decision to press charges, wondering if I should have just let it go, kept the family together at any cost. But then I'd remember that text message. "She's just being dramatic. Let her figure it out herself." I'd remember lying on that cold bathroom floor, bleeding and abandoned, and I'd know I'd made the right choice. Because protecting myself wasn't selfish, demanding respect wasn't unreasonable, and refusing to enable someone's criminal behavior, even when that someone was your own child, wasn't cruel. It was necessary. It was survival. It was self-love. At 71 years old, I'd finally learned the most important lesson of all. You teach people how to treat you, and if they refuse to treat you with basic human dignity, you have every right to walk away, even if walking away means sending them to prison. I went inside my cottage, made myself chamomile tea, and sat down with a photo album Diane had given me. Pictures of Sophia and Marcus at various ages, smiling and laughing and growing up beautiful and kind, despite their father's failures. These were my legacy now, not Kenneth, but the grandchildren who loved me unconditionally, who called me every week, who made me cards for my birthday, and told me I was brave. The next generation who would grow up knowing that standing up for yourself, even when it's hard, even when it hurts, is always the right choice. I closed the album and smiled. After surgery, I'd begged for help with a text, and no one had answered. But in the silence that followed, I'd found something even more valuable than help. I'd found myself. Dorothy's story is one of courage, resilience, and reclaiming power after betrayal. She discovered that sometimes the people who are supposed to love us most are the ones who hurt us worst. But she also learned that she was strong enough to survive it and even thrive afterward. If you or someone you love is experiencing financial exploitation or elder abuse, please reach out to Adult Protective Services or local authorities. You deserve to be treated with dignity and respect, no matter your age. Thank you for following Dorothy's journey to the end. Comment below with your thoughts on her story. What city are you from? What would you have done in her situation?
Your engagement helps stories like this reach people who need to hear them.